Good evening, dear listener. Welcome to Dreamy History Tales, where history slows down and the world grows quiet. There's nothing you need to do now. Just rest, breathe, and listen. Tonight, we step gently into the past, not the loud moments, but the calm ones. Wherever you're listening from, and whatever time it is for you, I'm glad you're here. If these soft journeys through history bring you comfort, feel free to subscribe. For now, let the past whisper and allow yourself to rest. The Silent Night of Ancient Egypt. A calm history. In the deep folds of time, long before the modern world learned to measure life by clocks and calendars, there existed a land where evenings arrived gently, without urgency. This land was Egypt, and its nights were not empty or frightening. They were calm, deliberate, and deeply meaningful. When the sun slowly sank behind the western desert, ancient Egypt entered a sacred pause. The day did not end abruptly. Instead, it softened. The heat loosened its grip, the air cooled, and the land exhaled. This quiet transition from light to darkness shaped how people lived, thought, and dreamed. This is not a story of battles, kings, or conquest. This is a story of a night, a peaceful, unhurried night in ancient Egypt. The gentle descent of evening. As the sun dipped low, its golden light stretched across the Nile like a ribbon of fire. Palm trees stood still, their shadows long and thin. Farmers returning from the field slowed their steps, not because they were tired, but because evening demanded gentleness. The Nile itself changed character at sunset. By day, it was busy. Boats crossed, water was lifted for irrigation, children laughed along its banks. But by night, the river became reflective. Its surface darkened, mirroring the sky. The water moved quietly, carrying stars in its flow. Ancient Egyptians believed this transition held deep meaning. The sun was not simply disappearing. It was traveling, beginning its nightly journey through the underworld. Darkness, therefore, was not an ending, but a passage. Homes filled with soft light villages settled into silence. Mud brick houses, warm from the sun, released heat slowly. Inside, oil lamps were lit, small flames trembling gently, casting shadows on walls painted with simple symbols and patterns. Families gathered close. Meals were modest: bread, onions, dates, perhaps fish from the river. Eating was unhurried. There were no distractions, no distant noise of machines, no urgency to rush into tomorrow. Parents spoke softly to their children. Stories were shared. Stories of the river, of ancestors, of gods who protected the home during the long hours of night. These stories were not told loudly. They were whispered, as if the night itself was listening. The pyramids. Under the stars, far beyond the villages, the pyramids stood in complete stillness. By day, they were imposing, brilliant under the sun. But at night, they transformed. Moonlight softened their sharp edges. Their massive forms blended into the desert, appearing less like monuments of power and more like quiet guardians. To the ancient mind, they were not symbols of fear, but of balance. Structures that connected earth and sky, life and eternity. The stars above them shone brightly, unobstructed by artificial light. Egyptians carefully observed these stars. They believed certain ones never set, remaining eternal in the sky. These imperishable stars were associated with the afterlife, guiding souls gently beyond death. Standing beneath such a sky, silence did not feel empty. It felt full. the night as protection, not threat. Unlike many later cultures that feared darkness, ancient Egyptians respected it. Night was when the world rested and renewed itself. It was a time when gods were active, guarding the balance of the universe. Doors were closed, not out of fear, but out of ritual. Amulets were placed nearby. Simple prayers were spoken, not long, not dramatic, just calm acknowledgments of gratitude and trust. Sleep was considered sacred. It was believed that during sleep, the soul traveled lightly, learning and renewing itself. Dreams were important, but not overwhelming. They were messages delivered softly, never forced. There was no sense that night was dangerous by default. Instead, it was necessary. The rhythm of nature. The desert cooled rapidly after sunset. A gentle breeze moved across the sand, erasing footprints from the day. This daily erasure reminded people that nothing permanent needed to be forced. Life continued, not through struggle, but through rhythm. Animals moved quietly. Owls called in the distance. The sound of insects filled the air, steady and soothing. These sounds were familiar, comforting, part of an unchanging pattern that had existed for generations. People slept in harmony with these rhythms. They woke with the sun, worked with the light, and rested with the dark. There was no rebellion against nature, only cooperation. Time without hurry. Perhaps the most calming aspect of ancient Egyptian nights was the absence of urgency. Time was not something to chase. It flowed like the Nile, steady, reliable, patient. There were no deadlines pressing into the darkness. Tomorrow would arrive when the sun returned, just as it always had. This certainty allowed people to surrender fully to rest. Even the concept of eternity in Egyptian belief was not anxious or demanding. Eternal life was imagined as a continuation of calm existence. Fields to walk through, waters to cross, peace to maintain. A philosophy of stillness. Without writing philosophy books, ancient Egypt practiced a philosophy of stillness. Balance between light and dark, work and rest, sound and silence, was central to life. Night was the teacher of this balance. It reminded people that productivity was not constant motion, that strength could be quiet, that power did not always speak loudly. In the stillness of night, one could sense the universe breathing. The final hours, before dawn. As the night deepened, sleep became heavier. Lamps dimmed. Fires died down. The stars shifted slowly, marking time in a way only careful observers noticed. Just before dawn, the world held its breath. The darkest moment passed almost unnoticed. Then, faint light appeared on the horizon. Another cycle prepared to begin. The sun would rise again. Life would continue. And night would return. Just as gently. Why this night still matters. The silent nights of ancient Egypt offer something rare to the modern mind. Permission to slow down. They remind us that history is not only made of events, but of moments. That civilizations are built not just in daylight, but in the calm acceptance of darkness. To imagine an Egyptian night is to imagine a world where rest was respected, silence was meaningful, and life moved at the pace of nature. And perhaps, in remembering that world, we can borrow a little of its calm. A silent morning in the Indus Valley. A calm history. Long before history learned to speak loudly, there was a civilization that preferred quiet order over spectacle. It left behind no grand epics of kings shouting commands, no towering statues demanding attention. Instead, it offered something far more subtle: balance, calm, and everyday harmony. This was the world of the Indus Valley civilization. What follows is not a tale of conquest or collapse. It is a gentle walk through a peaceful morning thousands of years ago. The first light of day dawn arrived softly in the Indus Valley. The sun did not burst into the sky. It appeared slowly, pale gold spreading across the horizon. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of river water and damp earth. The great Indus River flowed nearby, wide and patient, its surface barely disturbed. In cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, streets lay quiet. Straight, carefully planned roads stretched between brick houses, their symmetry calming to the eye even before the day had fully begun. This was a civilization that woke without haste. Homes built for peace. The houses of the Indus Valley were simple but thoughtful. Baked brick walls held warmth from the previous day. Inner courtyards allowed sunlight to enter gently, never harshly. People stepped out slowly. Some carried clay pots to collect water. Others swept doorways, clearing dust not because they feared disorder, but because order felt natural. There were no palaces towering above the rest. No homes screamed importance. Architecture here did not dominate. It supported life quietly. The sound of the city. The city's sounds were soft and rhythmic. Footsteps on brick, water pouring into jars, a distant call between neighbors. No shouting, no horns, no machines. The city did not overwhelm the senses. It breathed alongside its people. Craftsmen began their work calmly. Potters shaped clay with steady hands. Bead makers polished stones until they shone softly in the morning light. Each task followed knowledge passed down over generations, perfected not through urgency, but patience. Water as a daily ritual. Water was central to Indus life, not as luxury, but as quiet respect. Every home had access to wells. Streets were lined with covered drains, an engineering achievement still admired today. Cleanliness was not enforced through command. It was embedded into daily living. Bathing was common, almost meditative. Water touched skin gently, washing away not only dust, but fatigue. The famous Great Bath was not built for spectacle. It was likely a place of calm gathering, reflection, and renewal. Here, water was not conquered. It was honored. A society without loud power. One of the most calming mysteries of the Indus Valley is what it lacks. No giant statues of rulers, no glorified battle scenes, no monuments declaring dominance. This absence speaks volumes. Power here seems to have been quiet, distributed, practical, almost invisible. Leadership likely existed, but it did not demand attention. Order was maintained through shared values rather than force. Life moved forward without drama, the rhythm of work and rest. Work in the Indus Valley followed the sun. Morning was for labor. Midday brought rest. Afternoons slowed naturally. Evenings were communal and gentle. There was no obsession with endless productivity. People worked because work was part of living, not because time demanded conquest. Food was prepared slowly. Grains were ground by hand. Meals were eaten without rush. Conversation mattered more than speed. This rhythm, steady, predictable, created a sense of safety. The language of symbols. Though their script remains undeciphered, The symbols of the Indus Valley appear everywhere, on seals, pottery, tools. They are small, compact, unassuming. These symbols were likely not meant to shout meaning, but to hold it quietly. They suggest communication designed for function, not display. Even in writing, this civilization chose restraint. Evening approaches. As the day progressed, heat softened into warmth. Shadows lengthened. The city slowly returned to stillness. Children played briefly, then tired. Adults gathered, not in great halls, but in familiar spaces. Fires were lit. Light flickered gently against brick walls. There was no fear of nightfall. Darkness was expected, welcomed, understood. Stars began to appear, one by one, uninterrupted by smoke or glare. Sleep as a shared understanding. Sleep came naturally. Homes grew quiet, streets emptied. Only the soft sounds of night remained. Wind, insects, distant water. People slept knowing tomorrow would resemble today. This predictability was comforting, not boring. It meant stability, continuity. In this civilization, uncertainty did not rule the mind. What the Indus Valley teaches us. The calm history of the Indus Valley offers a rare lesson. A civilization does not need noise to thrive. Progress can be silent. Strength can be organized. Peace can be practical. They built cities not to impress the future, but to support the present. And perhaps that is why, even in ruins, their cities still feel peaceful. A final thought. Imagine standing alone on an Indus Valley street at dawn. No voices, no urgency, just straight roads, warm brick, flowing water, and the quiet certainty that life is unfolding exactly as it should. This is not a lost world. It is a reminder, a peaceful evening in ancient Greece, a calm history. 2150 words, written for slow reading and rest. Long before the modern world learned to hurry, long before time became something to chase, there was an evening ritual practiced quietly across the hills, islands, and coastlines of Greece. It was not written into law, nor enforced by kings. It was simply understood. When the day ended, life softened. This is not a story of wars, philosophers debating loudly in public squares, or marble statues frozen in dramatic poses. This is the story of an ordinary evening, calm, unremarkable, and therefore deeply meaningful. The sun's gentle departure. In ancient Greece, the sun did not disappear suddenly. It lingered. As evening approached, light slid slowly down the olive-covered hills. The sky turned pale gold, then soft orange, then a quiet blue. The Aegean Sea reflected these colors patiently, as if memorizing them. Fishermen returning to shore pulled their boats up onto sand and stone. There was no urgency. Tomorrow's work could wait. Nets were folded neatly, not thrown aside. Salt clung to hands, and the smell of the sea followed them home. The world did not rush into darkness. It drifted. Homes designed for calm Greek homes were not built to impress strangers. They were built to shelter life. Stone walls held the day's warmth. Courtyards allowed evening air to circulate freely. Doors stood open while light remained, welcoming breeze and conversation. Inside, oil lamps were prepared but not yet lit. Their presence was reassuring. Small, steady, predictable. When lit, they cast a warm amber glow, never harsh, never overwhelming. Families gathered slowly. No one checked the time. There was no need. Evening had its own rhythm. The language of quiet conversation. Dinner in ancient Greece was not an event. It was a continuation of the day. Food was simple. Bread, olives, cheese, fruit, perhaps fish or lentils. Meals were shared without ceremony. People spoke in low voices, not because silence was demanded, but because loudness felt unnecessary. Stories were exchanged gently, not heroic epics, but everyday memories. Something seen in the market, a comment about the weather, a neighbor's good harvest. Laughter came softly and faded naturally. Silence was not awkward, it was comfortable. The sea at dusk. For those living near the coast, evening belonged to the sea. As the sun lowered, waves slowed, not physically, but perceptually. Their sound softened into a rhythm that invited rest. Gulls quieted. The horizon blurred gently, erasing sharp lines. People often sat facing the water, doing nothing in particular. This was not considered idleness. It was presence. The Greeks understood that watching the sea required no justification. The sea at dusk. For those living near the coast, evening belonged to the sea. As the sun lowered, waves slowed, not physically, but perceptually. Their sound softened into a rhythm that invited rest. Gulls quieted. The horizon blurred gently, erasing sharp lines. People often sat facing the water, doing nothing in particular. This was not considered idleness. It was presence. The Greeks understood that watching the sea required no justification. A world without artificial light. When darkness arrived, it arrived fully. There were no glowing streets, no distant hum of electricity. Night covered everything evenly, restoring balance between earth and sky. Stars emerged, clear, numerous, unchallenged. Constellations were familiar companions. They were not tools for navigation alone. They were reminders of order beyond human control. People looked up often, not to search for meaning, but to acknowledge scale. Under such a sky, thoughts naturally slowed. Philosophy, without noise. Ancient Greece is often remembered for philosophy, but philosophy did not always occur in debate halls. Many of the most profound reflections happened quietly in the evening, after the day's labor had ended. A person might sit alone, or with a close companion, contemplating simple questions. What is enough? What brings balance? What does a good life feel like? These thoughts were not rushed toward answers. They were allowed to rest. Wisdom was not extracted forcefully. It was allowed to arrive on its own. The absence of constant purpose. One of the most calming aspects of ancient Greek evenings was the lack of constant purpose. No one felt pressured to improve themselves after sunset. There were no expectations to maximize time, no sense that rest needed to be earned. Even gods were imagined as resting, watching, observing, existing without constant action. This acceptance of stillness created space for the mind to breathe. Night as a companion darkness in ancient Greece was not feared by default. Doors were secured, lamps were placed carefully, and then people surrendered to night. They did not fight it with excessive light or noise. Sleep came gradually. Bodies recognized cues: cooler air, dimmer light, reduced sound. Dreams were considered part of life, not interruptions to it. Night was not a threat. It was a companion. Sounds of the night without machines, the night had its own voice. Crickets established a steady rhythm. Wind passed through trees gently. Somewhere, water moved quietly. These sounds were not distractions. They were signals that the world was functioning normally. Silence was never absolute, but it was soft. Time measured differently. In ancient Greece, time at night was not measured in minutes. It was measured in sensations. When the oil lamp dimmed, when the breeze cooled, when eyelids grew heavy. This sensory measurement of time reduced anxiety. There was no fear of wasting the evening. It unfolded exactly as it should. Dreams without pressure. Dreams were respected, but not obsessively analyzed. They were seen as gentle messages, sometimes meaningful, sometimes simply reflections of daily life. No dream demanded immediate interpretation. People woke without alarms. Morning arrived naturally, signaled by light rather than sound. This gentle transition protected the mind. The moral of a calm evening. The calm evenings of ancient Greece reveal a truth modern life often forgets. A meaningful life does not require constant intensity. Balance matters more than speed. Stillness matters as much as movement. Rest is not absence, it is foundation. Why this evening still matters. We often imagine ancient civilizations through their loudest moments. Wars, speeches, monuments. But civilizations are sustained in quiet hours. Ancient Greece endured not only because of ideas, but because of rhythms. Daily, nightly, seasonal rhythms that respected human limits. Evenings taught people how to stop. A final image. Imagine yourself sitting on a stone step in an ancient Greek village. The sea darkens, stars emerge. A lamp flickers beside you. Nothing is expected of you. Nothing is demanded. You are allowed to simply exist. This is not nostalgia. It is memory carried through time. Closing thought history does not only teach us what happened. Sometimes it teaches us how to be. And the calm evenings of ancient Greece whisper a simple lesson. Slow down. The world will wait. A peaceful morning in ancient China. A calm history. Long before the world learned to live in haste, before days were divided into tight schedules and nights filled with restless thought, there was a land where calm was not an idea, but a way of being. This land was China, and its mornings unfolded like a quiet breath. This is not a story of emperors issuing commands, nor of armies marching across borders. This is the story of an ordinary morning, one so gentle that it barely announces itself. The arrival of dawn. In ancient China, morning did not arrive suddenly. It emerged. Mist rose slowly from rivers and rice fields. The sky lightened almost imperceptibly, as if careful not to disturb the sleeping land. The sun appeared not as a blaze, but as a pale glow behind distant hills. Birds began to stir first. Their calls were soft and spaced apart, leaving room for silence between sounds. The wind moved lightly through bamboo groves, producing a sound more like breathing than motion. Nothing hurried this moment. Nothing pushed it forward. Homes that woke gently. Village homes were built close to the earth. Wood, clay, and stone blended naturally into the landscape. Courtyards faced inward, creating private worlds where calm could gather. Doors opened slowly. Someone stepped outside, stretching, inhaling cool air. A kettle was placed on a small fire. Steam rose quietly, dissolving into the morning mist. No one spoke loudly. Voices were low, respectful of the hour. Morning was understood to be fragile, something to be handled carefully. The river's steady presence. Rivers like the Yellow River flowed nearby, wide and patient. They did not demand attention, yet they defined everything. Farmers paused before beginning work, standing at the riverbank for a moment longer than necessary. Watching water move was not considered wasted time. It was a way to align the mind. The river did not rush. Neither did life. Ancient Chinese thought saw water as the ultimate teacher, strong without force, persistent without struggle. Morning beside the river reminded people of this lesson daily. Work as a quiet continuation. When work began, it did so without tension. Fields were entered respectfully. Tools were used with familiarity rather than urgency. Movements were efficient, but never sharp. Even labor had a rhythm meant to preserve the body and mind. There was no illusion that work needed to be dramatic to be meaningful. Planting, tending, repairing. These acts were valued precisely because they were ordinary. People worked together without unnecessary speech. Silence allowed attention to remain on the task, on balance, on breath. Harmony over achievement. Ancient Chinese life emphasized harmony over conquest. The goal was not to dominate nature, but to cooperate with it. Seasons were followed, not resisted. Morning work respected temperature, light, and soil. This approach created a profound calm. There was no constant anxiety about improvement or expansion. Life was measured in continuity, not escalation. To live well was to live in tune. Tea and stillness. As the sun rose higher, work paused briefly. Tea was prepared. The act was slow. Water heated patiently. Leaves were chosen carefully. Cups were small, encouraging mindfulness rather than indulgence. Drinking tea was not about stimulation. It was about awareness. Warmth spread gently through the body, grounding the mind. Conversation, if it happened, remained light. Silence was never awkward. It was welcomed. Thought without strain. Philosophical thought in ancient China did not always require discussion. Many insights arose during moments like these. Watching steam rise, listening to birds, observing the way light changed across a courtyard wall. Wisdom was not something to chase. It arrived quietly, often when effort ceased. The mind, unburdened by noise, naturally settled. Children and calm children were present, but they were not overstimulated. They observed adults closely, learning through imitation rather than instruction. Play existed, but it flowed naturally from the environment: sticks, water, open space. There was no sense that childhood needed to be hurried toward adulthood. Growth unfolded gradually, like the morning itself. Architecture of balance buildings reflected this philosophy. Homes and halls were aligned carefully, respecting direction, wind, and sunlight. Roofs curved gently. Pathways guided movement without forcing it. Nothing felt aggressive. Everything felt intentional. Even empty space was valued. Courtyards, open walkways, and gardens provided room for pause, for nothingness. Gardens as reflection. Gardens were not decorative excess. They were living metaphors. Rocks symbolized mountains. Water represented flow. Plants were chosen for balance, not brilliance. Walking through a garden was like walking through a thought. Morning visits to gardens were common. Dew still clung to leaves. Stones were cool underfoot. Here, reflection happened without words. Time without pressure. Morning in ancient China was not divided into strict units. Time was felt rather than measured. It passed with the movement of shadows, the warmth of air, the progress of light. There was no sense that morning was something to get through. It was something to inhabit. This removed anxiety before it could form. The quiet authority of elders' elders held influence, but they rarely raised their voices. Their authority came from experience, not command. Advice was offered gently, often indirectly. Stories carried lessons without instruction. Morning conversations with elders were valued. They anchored the day in perspective rather than urgency. Sounds that belonged. The sounds of morning were familiar and limited. Water moving, birds calling, tools touching soil, footsteps on earth. There were no competing noises. No sound demanded dominance. This allowed the nervous system to remain calm, unthreatened. Spirituality without urgency. Spiritual practice was woven into daily life. A small bow, a moment of stillness, a quiet acknowledgement of balance. There was no pressure to perform devotion. Reverence existed naturally, like breathing. Morning was considered a sacred threshold, not because of ritual, but because of its potential for clarity. Preparing for the day, not battling it. As the sun climbed, activity increased, but never abruptly. The body warmed gradually. The mind sharpened without strain. The day unfolded without resistance. There was no sense that life was something to overcome. It was something to walk alongside. What this morning teaches us. The calm mornings of ancient China offer a powerful lesson. Peace is not found by escaping life, but by aligning with it. Silence is not emptiness. Stillness is not stagnation. Slowness is not weakness. They are foundations. Why this calm endures. Even now, thousands of years later, the memory of such mornings resonates. It speaks to something fundamental in the human nervous system, a need for rhythm, predictability, and quiet presence. Modern life often ignores this need. Ancient China did not. A final image. Imagine standing in a courtyard at dawn, mist lifting, tea steaming, birds calling softly. Nothing demands your attention. Nothing competes for your mind. You are exactly where you should be. Closing reflection. History often tells us what humans have done. But calm history tells us how humans once felt. And in the quiet mornings of ancient China, we are reminded that peace was never rare. It was simply practiced. Long before history became loud with empires, declarations, and conquest, there lived a man who discovered something far quieter. He did not seek power, did not command armies, and did not raise monuments in his name. Instead, he sat beneath a tree, listened to the night, and learned how suffering ends. This is the calm night of Gautama Buddha. Not a moment of enlightenment alone, but an ordinary gentle night in ancient India when the world slowed enough for clarity to appear. This is not a sermon. It is not a lesson. It is a night. The world grows quiet night. In ancient India arrived without announcement. There were no bells to signal its arrival, no lamps lining roads, no walls glowing in artificial light. The sky simply darkened, and the land accepted it. Forests softened into shadow. Villages grew still. Fires dimmed. The air cooled gradually, carrying the scent of earth and leaves. Crickets began their patient song, not as performers, but as part of the night's breathing. In this quiet world, Siddhartha Gautama walked slowly, barefoot on cool ground. He did not rush. He had learned that rushing only disturbed the mind. A place beneath the tree. The Bodhi tree stood silently, its broad leaves whispering faintly when the wind passed through them. Beneath it, the ground was worn smooth by time, footsteps, and stillness. Siddhartha sat down, not dramatically, not with intention to change the world. He sat because the body naturally seeks rest when the mind no longer resists. Around him, the night continued without regard for his presence. This indifference was comforting. He did not need the universe to notice him. He closed his eyes, the body at rest. His posture was simple, balanced, unforced. Breath moved in and out gently, unnoticed by anyone but the body itself. There was no effort to control it. The breath knew its work better than the mind ever could. Muscles softened. The tension of the day dissolved. Even thought slowed, like sediment settling at the bottom of clear water. The night held him without demand. Silence as a teacher. In that silence, nothing spoke loudly, but everything was present. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft shift of air against skin. Each sound arrived and departed without invitation. None insisted on attention. Siddhartha did not chase them away, nor did he follow them. He simply noticed. This noticing, calm, non-judging, was itself the beginning of freedom. The mind without struggle. Thoughts appeared, as they always do. Memories of palace life, images of hunger and wandering, questions without urgency. But something had changed. These thoughts no longer pulled him. They arose, stayed briefly, and dissolved, like ripples in a pond after a stone sinks. The mind, no longer fighting itself, rested naturally. This rest was deeper than sleep. Night without fear. In many cultures, night is associated with danger. But here, beneath the tree, darkness was not threatening. It was protective. The absence of light removed distraction. Forms blurred, distinctions softened. The world simplified itself. Nothing needed to be done. Nothing needed to be solved. The night allowed this truth to be felt, not understood. Time without meaning hours passed, or perhaps they did not. Time lost its sharp edges. Without clocks, without markers, the night expanded gently. Siddhartha was not waiting for dawn. He was not seeking a moment. He was present. In this presence, the idea of before and after faded. There was only awareness, steady and clear. The body and the earth. The ground beneath him was cool and firm. He felt its support without thinking about it. The earth did not question him, did not test him, did not demand justification. This silent support mirrored what he was discovering within himself. That peace does not require explanation. Insight without drama. There was no thunder, no blinding light, no voice from the sky. Understanding arrived quietly. He saw suffering, not as an enemy, but as a condition. He saw desire, not as evil, but as clinging. He saw release, not as escape, but as letting go. These insights did not overwhelm him. They settled gently, like leaves falling into place.